welcome and good morning from my side to everyone. My fond greetings to dignitaries on the stage. I would like to request Mr. Ayaz Menon, President of the Mumbai Press Club, to be please seated. Mr. Ezekiel Lamani, Officer in Charge, UNESCO New Delhi. Mr. Sami Waqas, Council Deputy Head of Mission. Ms. Sabina Inderjeet, Vice President, International Federation of Journalists. And Mr. Gurbeer Singh, Chairman of the Mumbai Press Club also. Too. I, Ashita Singh from the UNESCO New Delhi office, welcome you all to the celebration of World Press Freedom Day 2023, organized by the UNESCO New Delhi office, the Consulate General of France in Mumbai, and Mumbai Press Club. In 1993, the UN General Assembly proclaimed 3rd May as World Press Freedom Day. This year's special 30th anniversary celebration of World Press Freedom Day is therefore a call to recenter press freedom as well as independent, pluralistic, and diverse media as necessary key to the enjoyment of all other human rights. All human rights are universal, indivisible, independent, and interrelated. To begin with the inaugural session, I invite Mr. Ayaz Memon to give the opening remarks. Mr. Memon is the president of the Mumbai Press Club, senior journalist, columnist, and author. He has been a journalist for almost 46 years, a graduate in economics and law from Mumbai University. He started off as a sports writer, editor, and to edit newspaper Midday, Bombay Times, and DNA. Apart from being editor of Sports Week, he's been also the editor of The Independent and Times of India at various stages. He is now consulting editor with Network 18 and columnist with leading newspapers, writing on sports, politics, cinema, and social issues. Mr. Menon.
Sorry. Thank you, Ashita, and a warm welcome to everybody over here in the Press Club of Mumbai, the Deputy Consul General of France, and all the delegates who are here. The event itself is momentous. 30th year of Press Freedom Day. I think it's so crucial for all of us, not just from the Press Club of India, but even for the delegates who share their views here and the world at large. I think I'll just kind of pluck a quote out of Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of the democracy in the United States, that the security of all lies in the press being free, in a free press. And the minute you compromise on that, or you let it be encroached by people who are not going to allow you to have a free press, then there's serious trouble. And I think this is what UNESCO also has approached it, since 1993, and this has been one of the charters of people who are, we've got democracies, we've got electoral democracies, and we've also got electoral democracies which suffer from the seizure of the media or the press, and therefore it doesn't remain a functional democracy. And I think that's the hazard which we all face. In the Press Club of Mumbai, we often debate this amongst ourselves, and we try and host as many events as possible which will accentuate what a free press means for us and what it should mean for the rest, not just of Press Club members, but for the country at large. Just as just to kind of fill you in on what else we do, I took them around for a little tour of this place. We've got a lovely bar. We've got a lovely terrace where we can watch sport and dharnas and protests. Uh, and we've got a art gallery kind of a thing on if you go up the stairs. But we also have something called the Red Ink Awards. The Red Ink Awards are awards which are given to the media journalists, print as well as digital and television, who are doing excellent work or showing excellence in the areas that we all covet as journalists, which is upholding the freedom of the press, doing the kind of stories that make a difference to our society, our community, our country, and obviously reflect the ethos of what a functional democracy and a free, vibrant democracy should be. So, Mumbai Press Club is, I might add that, even at the cost of seeming like I'm patting my own back or we are patting our own backs, but we are very staunch votaries of that. And I'm absolutely delighted that we are having this event at the Mumbai Press Club, because it just adds to what we are doing and adds a lot of heft to what has been our, endeavors over the years. I'm sure in the course of the day, informally and formally, you'll come to know more about what the Mumbai Press Club does. But suffice to say that we are absolutely happy and delighted that this event is being staged here. We've got some representatives from the media college, some youngsters who I hope will get excited and enthused about what the freedom of the press means by meeting people who are not just from Press Club of Mumbai, but the delegates who are here. And needless to add that a free press and human rights are completely strongly intertwined. Without one, the other can't exist. If you don't have a free press, then willy-nilly you will find that human rights are getting affected, if not demolished. So that's a very strong, reason why we should all be in the vanguard of trying to uphold the value of a free press. And especially in the context of Asia or South Asia, where such a vast number of people live. I mean, the countries may number 7, 8, 10, but the number of people who live in these countries is humongous, starting with India or Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, etc., etc. And the number of human beings, therefore, who are subject to, either the good things that can happen with the free press, or not so good things that can happen if the press is not allowed to, is fettered and not allowed to function freely. So, without much ado, let me just say that again, happy to be here. And I think in India we have our own issues. We fall into number 150 in the World Press ranking system, which is quite dismaying for all of us, and especially for veterans like Gurbir, myself, Rajesh, who've been around in this profession for a fair number of years. And it's a recurring subject in our meetings when we have, or informally or formally, is something that we all discuss and we are concerned about. I'm sure that these concerns will be there in other countries also, and we've got delegates from these countries to talk about it. So thank you so much, Ashita. I think I've done my bit. Take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maimon, for the warm welcome. I'm sure this observance of Press Freedom Day today will serve as a platform to share knowledge and learn from our esteemed speakers. I now welcome Mr. Ezekiel Lamani for delivering the welcome address. Mr. Lamani is currently the officer in charge and also the advisor for communication and information for South Asia at the UNESCO New Delhi office. Before joining UNESCO New Delhi, he worked with UNESCO in Paris, Nairobi, Accra, and Harare, and has more than 30 years of professional experience in supporting communication and information policies and practices in developing countries, especially in Africa. He has participated in reforming and formulation of African national communication and information policies to support free expression, access to information, and safety of journalists. I invite you, Mr. Ezekiel.
Thank you very much, Ashita. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Pokazi, Deputy Head of Mission, Consulate General of France, Mr. Memon, President of the Mumbai Press Club, Ms. Sabina, Vice President of IFJ, International Federation of Journalists, distinguished guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. We've already been welcomed, so I'm not going to do the welcoming remarks. But I'm going to start by thanking our partners, our dear partners, the Consulate General of France here in Mumbai, the Press Club, Mumbai Press Club, without whom we would not have been able to organize this event. We are often accused of being a Delhi-centric organization, that is UNESCO. And we need partners such as these to actually be seen and to be present outside Delhi. So we're very, very thankful for your partnership. I am going to simply deliver the remarks of the UNESCO Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Audrey Azoulay, for the occasion of World Press Freedom Day today, the 3rd of May, 2023. And these remarks read as follows, and I quote: "Freedom of expression is the cornerstone of democratic society. Without a debate of ideas, without verified facts, without diversity of perspectives, democracy is a shadow of itself." And World Press Freedom Day was established to remind us of this. For the international community, it is first and foremost a question of combating the impunity that still surrounds crimes of which journalists are victims. Nearly 9 out of 10 murders of journalists are going unpunished. This, for instance, is the objective of the United Nations Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists and the issue of impunity, which UNESCO has led for 10 years. It is also about that independent media can continue to exist. It is about ensuring that independent media can continue to exist. With the digital evolution and revolution, the information landscape and its modes of production and distribution have been radically disrupted, jeopardizing the viability of independent professional media. To ensure that information remains a common good in the digital age, our member states, through the Windhoek Plus 30 Declaration of 2021, have undertaken to support independent journalism, ensure greater transparency of online platforms, and develop media and information literacy. We will not be able to do this without the actors who now have significant control over access to information, the digital platforms. This is why UNESCO held the Internet for Trust conference in February earlier this year, as an essential step towards the development of principles to regulate digital platforms. This is a fundamental issue because it involves both protecting freedom of expression and fighting disinformation and hate speech. 30 years after the first World Press Freedom Day, we can see how far we have come and how far we still have to go. So, let this day be an opportunity to ensure our commitment within international organizations to defending journalists and through them, press freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ezekiel, for setting the stage for the dialogue that we will be having today and for sharing the message from the Director General of UNESCO. I will now request our guest of honor, Mr. Sami Bouakaz, Counsel and Deputy Head of Mission, Consulate General of France in Mumbai, to deliver a speech. Mr. Buacas graduated in Italian language and civilization from the Sorbonne University in Paris, has vast experience of over 35 years in the diplomatic circle. He has worked for Linguistic and Education Corporation in Ghana, Nigeria, Mumbai, followed by Consular and Visa Affairs Management in the United States, Hong Kong, and Mexico. He headed back to Paris to work in the Visa Policy Subdirectorate before coming to Mumbai in 2021. I now request Mr. Buacas to please come.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our colleague from the UNESCO to have approached us to organize events outside of Delhi, because yes, India is a federation, but yes, we need to have things happening in the every state of the country, and why not Mumbai? And thank you very much to the Mumbai Press Club to welcome us. And thank you to make me the guest. I was about to say the guest of honor, but no, today the honor is all mine to be here with you during this auspicious day. You all know that France was a trailblazer when the freedom of speech was penned down in the Declaration of Human Rights in August 1789. And today, what we witness is a continuity of those principles affirmed more than 230 years ago. As we mark the 30th anniversary of the World Press Freedom Day, let's remember that if this day has grown in scale, the aim is still the same: to reaffirm the fundamental role of free, independent, and pluralistic media. It is paramount to keep being vigilant. Though the freedom of expression is the core of the Article 19 of the UN Charter, media freedom, safety of journalists, and freedom of expression are still challenged and, sadly, I might say, increasing under attack. The issue of world press freedom is still topical when, in some part of the world, international media outlets have been suspended indefinitely or simply banned from broadcasting. It is still topical when numerous local media outlets have been forced to close. It is still topical when we witness increasing attacks on the conditions in which journalists can do their work, attacks that has led to the arrest of many journalists when it is not their lives that are threatened. Or even worse, you know that last year, 86 journalists have been murdered, one every 4 days. And it is topical when massive information manipulation campaigns are on the rise. It is very much topical when the war against Ukraine is also a war against the freedom of speech at large. That's why France is at the forefront of the freedom of press. In September 2019, France has launched the International Partnership for Information and Democracy, endorsed now by 50 countries. And it is made to promote an information-friendly environment, to allow people to benefit from reliable information in order to enable themselves to forge an informed opinion, to combat large-scale online misinformation, and to take measures when, where professional journalism is weakened and where political control over the media persists. The countries that signed the partnership are committed to promote national and international legal framework to encourage freedom of opinion. And they stand by 3 principles: transparency, responsibility, and neutrality. But because fine words are not enough, and not to be accused of all talk and no actions, it is very worth noting that if political attacks against the press, as I was mentioning, are still very much a concern, independent media outlets are also faced with financial challenges and weakening business models. That's where the International Fund for Media of Public Interest comes into play. It is an initiative designed to address the economic challenges facing public interest media and help identify ways towards long-term sustainability. Between 2022 and 2024, France will contribute up to 15 million euros to support this fund. I'm going to conclude now, and I'd just like to quote the word of Maria Ressa, the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021, when she said, "Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without trust, we have no shared reality, no democracy, and it becomes impossible to deal with our own world existential problems." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bouakas, for your wonderful views and sharing the commitment of France to promote press freedom. I will now like to request Ms. Sabina Inderjeet to deliver the keynote address, which will be followed by the release of the South Asia Press Freedom Report. Ms. Sabina Inderjeet is the 3rd generation journalist and a trade union activist. She is also the first woman Secretary General of Indian Journalist Union, thrice elected Vice President of International Federation of Journalists, and founder President of Federation of Asia Pacific Journalists. Sabina was 2-term member of the Press Council of India, has held various positions in workers and state unions. She continues to uphold ethical journalism in this competitive digital world and is committed to the media, trade union movement, journalists, and human rights and press freedom, which is under siege in many countries. I now invite Ms. Sabina.
Good morning, everyone. Before the keynote address, let me just say that it's great to be back in the Mumbai Press Club. I was here way back in 1984. The press clubs in India, Mr. Sami, I don't know whether you're aware, but you'll get to know, largely known as drinking holes. I'm sure I'm not wrong, but it's really very encouraging, and I think my friend and colleague Gurbir has done a great job in the sense of bringing about a change in the Mumbai Press Club, where it's not just where you come back after work and want to have a drink, but you discuss and debate issues which are important to us journalists. And Mr. Ezekiel, thank you very much. I quite agree with you that we should move out of Delhi. It's getting too polluted, metaphorically. And it's good for me as well. I'm based in Delhi, so it's good for me as well to be here in Mumbai. Now, on a serious note, I normally speak extempore, but because I have a limited time, I thought I would prepare a speech, but bear with me. So we meet again a year later, and we meet again on this World Press Freedom Day, which is 30 years since the UN General Assembly decided to proclaim an International Press Freedom Day. And I was thinking what I should say. but I see a group of very young, I hope, journalists. And for me, before coming here and preparing what to say, I had a debate within myself. Do I celebrate this day? Do I mark this day? Or, I think better, have a stronger resolve to make this day more meaningful? Well, I certainly don't have reason to celebrate it. And I think I'd like to start and kick off a debate which should take place not just within this room, but further, by quoting my colleague and the president of the IFJ, President Dominique Pradali of the IFJ. IFJ, for the youngsters who would not be aware of it, is the world's largest journalist organization, union organization in the world. It has over 600,000 members in 140 countries. I quote, "From Peru to Iran, from Sudan to Afghanistan, governments are taking drastic measures to impede freedom of expression and prevent the public's right to know, including internet restrictions, beating, jailing, and intimidating journalists, controlling media content, and introducing drastic media laws and legislations to curb free flow of information. Since the adoption of the Windhoek Declaration in 1991, very little, I repeat, very little has been undertaken to create concrete conditions at international level to guarantee freedom and security of journalists." Few words, but I think they raise plenty of concern. I think what's important is when we started, and I've heard my previous speakers, I think we're all on the same page. The press freedom is under threat. So in this background today, with freedom of the press being under severe threat, more in these last, I would say, at least past 2-3 years. Shaping a future of rights, freedom of expression as a driver for all other human rights is definitely debatable and is all the more critical, not just for us in the media, but for society per se. Though freedom of expression is a fundamental human right enshrined in, all of us know, Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there are governments and a new breed of politicians, I would say. Well, in today's world, we don't have any more statesmen. I don't think I could name any, but with a new breed of politicians, they're doing precious little to uphold their commitments that they have made at the various international forums. We've heard, and we've got papers here which have talked about various covenants. Yes, they have made a difference. Yes, they have made us speak about these issues. But I think what is important is that the commitment that is required is missing. For the youngsters, the media is facing clampdown on this basic fundamental right, the right, freedom of expression. And this is so, and it's happening in many places because of its essential role in ensuring transparency and accountability from governments. And worse, this is not just dictatorial regimes or in conflict regions, but sadly in so-called democracies. And the worst, I come from one of the biggest democracies in the world. Another one is claimed by the United States of America, well known. It's there too. I think all of us remember that in the President Trump administration, fake news seemed to be his favorite word for everything that was written about or which was critical to him. In India, the word national security has become very popular, if it's critical or if it's independent reportage. Yes, to us journalists, press freedom is grounded in this right of freedom of expression. It underpins human rights such as freedom of thought, conscience, religion, among many others, which we as media and we as journalists seek to defend. And if this right is silenced, then our basic role and responsibility to help citizens make informed decisions gets completely eroded. If I cannot inform you about your rights, if I cannot question the policies of the government, then the citizen is not going to be aware. Gurpreet, I think you remember that there was a time, Ezekiel, there was a period in one of the governments we had here, was the earlier BJP government. And there was a campaign led by the government which talked about India shining. And it got the media, it worked on the media, and it got a majority of the media to talk about India shining. The ground reality was not there before the government. And the government lost despite its India shining slogan. So my point being that freedom of expression, free press is so very critical. And if citizens don't make that, citizens will end up at the mercies of governments, not just be deprived of the awareness of the various rights that they have, but worse, they would lose the voice or the platform of the fourth estate to demand those rights from governments. Press freedom facilitates holding the powerful to account. And I hope the young journalists here would remember that and must make that the resolve. In this exercise of standing up to power, holding them to account, the media houses and journalists play an essential role. But the freedom of media and safety of journalists is under increasing attack, as all of us have already said. And so the big question is, if our own freedom, our right of freedom of expression is curtailed, how does it expand to other human rights? How do I safeguard those human rights? Well, there are lots and lots of cases. In fact, as Indian Journalists Union Secretary General, I end up issuing press statements. Well, not every day, I would be exaggerating and I wouldn't be factually correct, but yes, I am issuing many more statements against and condemning these violations against our journalists more often than I did in the past. But there is one case that I want to highlight, and I choose the case of Julian Assange. What was his fault? What was his crime? His crime was to blow the undercover of the United States government and to talk about, throw focus on the war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now that certainly is not a crime, but he is under detention. And the US pursuit of Assange against the public's right to know poses a grave threat to the fundamental tenets of democracy, which are becoming increasingly fragile worldwide. His continued detention has an impact on media freedom and the rights of all journalists globally. His extradition will have a chilling effect, with all journalists and media workers at risk. Well, as said repeatedly, and I think it just keeps coming back, the fourth estate undeniably is being undermined with governments using every tool possible to silence independent media rather than seeing it as a partner in governance. My colleagues, especially UNESCO, has quoted figures. I will add to those figures. IFJ list of media professionals killed in case of duty of has numbered 68 in just 2022. Since 1998, it recorded 2,778 journalists killed across the world. 9 in 10 cases, I think that's the figure that is worldwide, we're not disclaiming it, remain unpunished and impunity reigns. There are growing threats now. We are talking about the digital revolution. In the next panel, we're going to have a very young, dynamic speaker, Internet Freedom Foundation, who is going to, I hope he's going to throw a light on this new digital age and how governments are clamping down. Because I think this digital age, we have seen through social media, we have seen through digital platforms, how it helped us in the pandemic. It played a major role in informing citizens and reaching out. And in fact, in our own country, it helped us to know how severe and how horrific the second wave was, because the print media was not reporting what was happening in the country. So as I said, there are growing threats to digital safety with cyber attacks, hacking, online harassment, especially women journalists, all creating a safety crisis for news professionals. But let's go beyond that. Let us remember and let us make a note that behind every statistic is also a human tragedy. A death, a kidnapping, a family left without a mother, father, a brother, or a sister. And I emphasize, behind every statistics is a country or community left without information, denied the human right to be properly informed. I'm going to skip immediately to something which is very, very important today, and we are in India, and we have our colleagues from South Asia, and we've had the good fortune, the IFJ Asia Pacific Office has had the good fortune of continued support from the UNESCO, and we are going to launch the 21st South Asia Press Freedom Report, and its title itself is telling: Pressure and Polarization, Powering Media's Resistance in South Asia. So as mentioned, there was a global scenario. It's no different, maybe perhaps worse than South Asia, because in South Asia, we have governments which are democracies. We have democratic governments. We are not dictatorships, as said in Pakistan, as said in Sri Lanka, as said in my own country, India. So let me just deal with it briefly. You'll all be getting a copy of Ashita. We'll be giving them a copy of, and it's going to be available online. The region has witnessed major political and economic upheavals this past year, even as it slowly emerges from the grip of COVID pandemic. Notably, citizens in this region are confronting a spectrum of new challenges to freedom of expression and their rights as political leaders, emboldened by powers usurped during the time of crisis, seem to have developed a habit of overreach, controls, and clampdowns. Laws made in the name of national security and emergency in recent times have sadly taken up a more permanent place to restrict fundamental freedoms and limit vital space of discourse, and institutions that underpin democracy are too frequently being threatened. This report, too, documents the challenges, and it shows the frightening situation that journalists are working under. It shows 140 violations, including 13 targeted killings. This is for this past year. 74 cases of jailings, detention or torture, legal harassment and assaults. Vast news deserts are emerging due to traditional media collapses and mass journalist layoffs. Yes, it's happening across the region. I'm made to understand a lot more in Sri Lanka because of the economic crisis they went through. At the same time, new and evolving media organizations and platforms are being tested and explored, and there are various models which are being explored to build sustainability. I think for South Asia, I would say that Afghanistan continues to be a major, major concern for us. It continues to be the worst hit, with the media grappling with the new normal post-Taliban takeover, with scores of Afghan media outlets becoming dysfunctional. Estimates say that out of 579 operating media houses, only 192 remain. Less than half of the 476 radio networks are still functioning. Media houses are unable to pay salaries, and Taliban strictures against women working saw 80% of women journalists lose their jobs. Afghanistan, the International Federation of Journalists, reacted promptly when the Afghanistan crisis took place, and that's where the role of journalists and solidarity comes in. Set up an emergency cell, and in that cell we asked our unions and affiliates across the world to support by way of not just money, but to get visas and to provide asylum to journalists. And yes, we were successful. Again, I would say a silver lining in this fight for helping journalists. Also, on Afghanistan, I have to say, and I must say that Pakistan, our affiliate in Pakistan, the Pakistan Federation, Federal Union of Journalists, has been very helpful for our colleagues in Afghanistan. They set up a safety home and EZICL. Thank you very much to the UNESCO, which is supporting another safety house for the journalists in Afghanistan, in Pakistan. The Sri Lankan media is adjusting to severe cuts, and we'll hear about it later. Press freedom continues to be a major concern in Pakistan. Religious extremism and polarization dog media in Bangladesh and Maldives. I think we have somebody from Bangladesh who would be speaking. The erosion of autonomy due to corporate takeovers of independent media was the most visible in India, which also topped the global list of the highest number of internet shutdowns for the 5th consecutive year. So much for freedom of expression and being able to have and share your opinion. The region frightfully saw growing schisms between communities and along religious lines. Hardline positions got more extended, endorsed by those in power. I think I'm taking long more time, but I'm going to skip. Another phenomenon which is very worrying for freedom of expression, and in a way I would say for safeguarding independent media, is that journalists themselves are getting polarized. And I would not say that it's wrong to vilify them, because now we have media which is very pro-government and which is anti-government, and this could be never happened in our times. We had our differences. So we'll have a panel of speakers, and I'm going to cut short, but I have to say this. It's not a very comfortable position we are in. And we're very pessimistic, and I am. I'd like to be optimistic. And I think there is a way out. There is a way out to safeguard this press freedom. And I say this because at the IFJ, we have been working for it. And With UNESCO here and with our French colleague here, I hope we will get the support. The IFJ is committed to promote international collective action to defend press freedom. We've already spoken about our figures, about how press freedom is impacted. What we say that the current human rights regime fails to take into account the risks associated with journalist profession. While everyone's right to free speech is protected, the exercise of freedom of expression by media professionals is distinct. They are involved in the circulation of information and ideas on a regular basis with a much wider impact on mass audiences, hence providing a greater incentive to target them by those who wish to censor unfavorable speech. The IFJ has launched an international convention on the safety of journalists and media professionals. We've started this campaign in 2018. We've called ourselves a group which has gone up to the United Nations, and we've had countries seeking their support to support this convention. My friends here would say, why another convention? We already have, as listed in the papers that you have, various declarations. However, we have a reason for it. The reason being that this is not in competition with other initiatives like the UN Plan of Action on Safety of Journalists. Rather, it takes a complementary course of action and seeks to remove important weaknesses specific to the situation. Such a vital initiative would make the safety of journalists and everyone's right to information a clear priority for the international community. I'd like all of you to go on the IFJ website and have a look at this convention. And I repeat, and I do hope that we would get your support, and my colleagues which have come from South Asian countries. I hope you would take up this matter, because we've talked about attacks. I think the remedy lies here. The remedy lies here not just for an independent press, but to ensure that the freedom of expression is there for each one of us. Let me just say at the end, I think there was a very nice quote. So, Mr. Sami, I also thought of using the same quote as you did, because I liked what she had said. But I think I found another one. It says, laws alone cannot secure freedom of expression. In order that every man presents his views without penalty, there must be a spirit of tolerance in the entire population. I may take the risk, and I may just add, not just the entire population. In today's times, it has to be the governments across the world. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry if I haven't taken more than my time.
Thank you, Ms. Sabina. I would now like to request our dignitaries on the stage to please launch the International Federation of Journalists and UNESCO South Asia Press Freedom Report 2022-23. We will distribute the copies of the report shortly. I also thank our esteemed guests for launching the Press Freedom Report. I now invite Mr. Gurbi Singh, Chairman, Mumbai Press Council, to please give the concluding remarks. Yeah, I mean, yes. Yes.
See, my confusion was I thought it was not concluding. There's a panel discussion after this, but I suppose you mean the conclusion of the initial section. Uh, I think it's all been summed up. UNESCO has flagged the importance of freedom of the press by declaring 3rd May as the World Press Freedom Day. I think it's extremely significant. Uh, the issues before us, whether you're living in a democratic country or a country which does not have a democratic system, press freedom is all the more important because democracies, as we see, are shrinking. Wherever we see, whichever part of the world, you take Brazil, you take India, you have a new form of government which is an elected autocracy. There are elections, but once the election is over, the party or the people in power feel that that's the end of democracy. They've got elected. Now they do what they want. And that's where press freedom is getting hammered. Press freedom is getting hammered because it holds a mirror to those in power of what society is. The cultural conflicts, the social conflicts, the political conflicts. And these are the areas which need to be expanded, need their scope and their operation needs to be expanded, not contracted. And it's unfortunate that as the world grows more technologically developed, more economically stronger and wealthier, you find that there's a greater and greater intolerance to alternative views, to criticism. And that's where the World Press Freedom Day becomes extremely important. I don't want to go through what all our guests and our speakers have said. They've underlined the areas of conflict, the countries like Afghanistan, which are really collapsing inwards, where human rights are concerned. And we have seen how the French are kind of making this an important issue in their world relationships, and how UNESCO is coordinating these things by underlining and flagging where societies and democracies and governments are going wrong. So this is the larger scenario which has been presented by the guests. I thank them on behalf of the Mumbai Press Club to have come here and taken the step of expanding the footprint of what UNESCO, what World Press Freedom stands for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gurveer Singh. We now move on to a second session on panel discussion. Please allow us 5 minutes of time to set the stage. The panel discussion will be coordinated by Ms. Snehal Agrawal, Deputy Press Attaché, Consulate General of France in Mumbai. We just take just 5 minutes break, please. Thank you.
It consists of the panel discussion uh, and people from various South Asian countries are here to participate in the panel discussion. I am very happy to have reconnected with Mr. Ayaz Memon, and that he was instrumental in making this collaboration with the Mumbai Press Club possible. Also, this is the first time, thanks to this day, that I got to meet Mr. Gurbir Singh, who I've been trying to meet since long time. Mr. Gurbir Singh is currently consulting editor with the New Indian Express, and he will be the moderator for the panel discussion. He was executive editor of Business World magazine till July 2016. He is also the chairman of the Mumbai Press Club, as you may know by now, and a member of the Press Council of India. Gurbir Singh is a senior business journalist with 40 years in the profession. He served the Economic Times in 2 stints, first on the production and editing side, and then after 1998 as senior assistant editor. He pioneered reporting on the business of television broadcasting and the film industry for the Economic Times, and has worked for a variety of publications including the Onlooker, Indian Express, and the Economic and Political Weekly. From 2007, he was a lead writer of the fortnightly Business World, and rose to become the magazine's executive editor in 2015. He was also awarded Best International Writer by the Emirate of Dubai for his understanding of business trends in West Asia in 2002. Kindly come on stage, sir. I would also like to introduce our regional speakers from Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. From Bangladesh, Ms. Tasmima Hussain, who is the editor of the Daily Ittifaq since 2013, has been editing and publishing fortnightly Ananya magazine since 1987, which is the country's pioneer women's magazine. The magazine is noted for its annual awards, Ananya Top 10 Awards, to outstanding women in Bangladesh since 1993. It also awards Ananya Literature Award for Women in Bangladesh in recognition of contribution to the field of literature, again since 1993. Tasmima Hussain is also involved in their family businesses, which include textile, printing, packaging, and newspaper since 1985 as managing director and executive director. She is the founder executive member of Breaking the Silence, a non-governmental organization since 1994, which is an advocacy group that works against child sexual abuse in Bangladesh. She is an active member of the Editors Council, Bangladesh Sangbad Sangast, Press Council, and Newspapers Owners Association of Bangladesh. Tasmima Hussain founded Ananya Foundation and holds the position of chairperson. It aims to make an inclusive society through women's welfare, equity, elimination of deprivation, and various social activities. She will be joining us online soon. From Bhutan, Ms. Pushpa Chetri, who is the director founder of Bodhi Media and Communications Institute. Ms. Pushpa, kindly come on stage. Ms. Pushpa is a social entrepreneur. She founded the Bodhi Media and Communications Institute in 2011, the first private institute of its kind in Bhutan, to contribute towards professional development of media and communication industry. She worked in Kunsel for 15 years prior to her entrepreneurial venture. She was awarded Loden's Best Entrepreneur Award in 2016. She has been managing communications for development projects, knowledge creation and dissemination, policy dialogues and social initiatives, apart from training for both local and international organizations. Our next participant is from India, Mr. Tanmay Singh, who is a senior litigation counsel at the Internet Freedom Foundation and leads the organization's strategic litigation vertical. He specializes in digital rights, press freedom, online free expression, and privacy. He specializes in he has been involved in cutting-edge digital rights litigation, such as challenging the constitutionality of internet suspensions, online censorship, the use of Pegasus, the 2021 IT rules, and sedition, among others. He received his undergrad degree in law from NLS Bangalore, his postgrad degree in law from the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and holds a business and law diploma from the Wharton School of Business. From Nepal, we have Ms. Durga Bhandari Podel, member of the Nepal Press Council. She has been involved in the journalism sector for over 30 years. She is also an advocate, member of the Kaski District Bar Association, member of Professional Progressive Lawyer Association of Kaski. She has been the editor and publisher for several newspapers, served as a reporter and also program producer for various media houses. And last but not the least, we have from Sri Lanka, Mr. Kumar Lopez, who is the CEO of Sri Lanka Press Institute. Mr. Kumar is a highly experienced strategic and operational leader who has demonstrated the ability to lead diverse teams of professionals to new levels of success in the information technology, humanitarian and development, automobile, education and media domains, profit and not-for-profit. Having a sound technical and business qualification of more than 26 years, bringing in the experience of strong strategic planning, general operations management, information technology management, customer service management, and project management. We would now begin the panel discussion.
Hello. Thank you very much. I think you've already introduced the guests. I won't go through, but just run through the names once. So we have from Bangladesh, Tasmina Hussain, who's online. From Bhutan, Pushpa Chetri. From India, Mr. Tanmay Singh. Nepal, Durga Bhandari Podel. And from Sri Lanka, Kumar Lopez. Warm welcome to all you. And what we'll do is we'll follow some kind of pattern. I think we have about an hour of discussion and maybe a small session on question and answers at the end of it. And we can do one or two rounds and then have a little chat amongst ourselves and then maybe throw it open to the House. The topic for the panel discussion, if you see your program, is an interesting and challenging one. It's interesting and significant to what is on debate, which is the World Press Freedom Day. A free news media, current challenges and prospects. We can sort of divide up into the challenges which each of the countries face, where a free news media is concerned, and more important, at the end, also look at possibilities of how we straighten this out. What are the forces that must pool together to ensure that freedom is guaranteed to news networks and news persons? So we can, look at both those aspects. Thank you very much to UNESCO, to the French Consulate for having taken the initiative. I couldn't be more honored because a small personal involvement. My sister Nina Sibyl was the director UNESCO stationed in New York, and she was a diplomat in the French embassy before that. She was part of the Foreign Service, and after that on lien to UNESCO, and finally joined the UNESCO as director. at the time somewhere when Shashi Tharoor was also in the United Nations. They were good friends that time. Unfortunately, she passed away due to cancer. And I think it's really, when I saw UNESCO and the French consulate doing this, I said, this is really something I shouldn't miss. So I think it's very important, and in memory of her too. So the topic, as we see, and it's already been gone into, we've had a lot of discussion on it, and it's very significant that how I'll do it is we'll just have a little summary of what the situation in India is, and then we can have each country sort of, we can have a small commentary from each of you for each of the countries after that. It's significant that the UN declared May 3rd, and to uphold the freedom of rights of freedom of expression in Article 19, in as far back as 1948. So it was part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and press freedom as a concept is defined in Article 19. So significant because the Constitution of India also underlines that in Article 19(1)(a) and Article 19(2), both of which would guarantee freedom of expression and speech, but not specifically press freedom. So press freedom is seen as part of the right to free expression and speech. And it's something which is flagged, that should the constitution makers, should lawmakers take that one step forward and also define press freedom as part of Article 19. But the significance is that the UN declaration under Article 19 and the Indian Constitution's fundamental rights is also under Article 19. So the point is, as we sit here and discuss the issue of freedom of press as part of the right to freedom of speech and expression, it is strange how all political parties in the opposition support this. And when they are in the government, they are opposed to it. The one thing which unites all our countries together is those in power look at deep suspicion at journalists, at news networks, and at the dissemination of communication. It's strange, but it's true that nobody wants a critic. And here is something which is very important, is the right to hold the mirror, is the right to criticize so that those who are doing wrong can be corrected. It's something which should be welcomed, but unfortunately not. All governments come together and see communication and news networks with deep suspicion, and very often take it there as a right to persecute and suppress this. It's done in a wide variety of ways. And I think somewhere there is a line which unites all these governments together. Broadly, I think there are two basic challenges, if we try and define it. The two basic challenges are, one is which suppresses press freedoms, which is a challenge to a more democratic and free news media. One is the legislative challenge, and the other is extrajudicial. If you broadly break it up, you see in legislative challenge, it's something like it started with the British Raj as far as India was concerned. And the British, as a government, promulgated the sedition law. So they found a very small difference between criticism and to bring down the nation, is to sort of destroy government as an institution. So criticism was sort of extended to mean that you are a challenge to nationhood itself, to the right of governments to exist. And so the sedition law became a very easy, marketable kind of way in which journalists and others were put behind bars. The British came and went, but unfortunately the government till today has not reversed, has not sort of rolled back the whole question of sedition. And till today, even comics and stand-up comedians have been arrested under that. It's tragic, but true. So you have sedition law in one way. You have a variety of other laws which control and which sort of give a handle to governments in India to put people behind bars, to restrict their right to report, to restrict their right to broadcast. For instance, you have the UAPA, the National Security Act. Now, for instance, Kashmir, the Press Council of India has just done a report about a year back, maybe less than that, maybe 9 months ago, on the situation of media in Kashmir. In Kashmir, at least 49 journalists we found after we did the survey to have been arrested under the Unlawful Activities Act, the UAPA. Under this act, there is hardly any provision for bail, and people rot for years. The last one arrested was one Fahad Khan of the Kashmir Wala. It's a digital platform, a digital news service. He's still behind bars. He gets out on bail on one platform, on one charge, and back again, another charge is put, and he's back again in jail. So UAPA is one form. The NSA, the National Security Act. There's something wrong with this. The National Security Act. Hello. The National Security Act, again, supposed to be an act to prevent terrorism, supposed to prevent outright unlawful and violent activities, has been used against trade unionists, against journalists. The latest one, which we honored during the Red Ink Awards, was a gentleman called Wang Chen. His first name was Biren Wangcheng from Meghalaya, I think. And his case was very interesting. His name is Kishore Chandra Wangcheng. On 20th June 2019, not Meghalaya, my mistake, in Manipur. Success against Manipur Chief Minister Biren Singh, and he secured his release under the Draconian National Security Act. And his case was dismissed the charges and released him on bail. So I'm talking of the misuse of law, the misuse of the judicial system itself, the kind of sections which are misinterpreted and misapplied to journalists, to incarcerate them, to harass them, to put charges on them. And finally, after that, they may be released, but they've lost 3 years of their life, 5 years of their life, 7 years of their life. Who compensates them? Take the case of the BBC case which has just happened. The BBC ran a documentary, we all know about it. The documentary was banned, we don't know why. And the BBC as an organization began to be harassed. Again, under the PMLA, again under the FEMA, the Foreign Exchanges Maintenance Act. And you'll be shocked to know, which is not known by many, is that the journalists within BBC, so BBC as an institution was charged, and these cases of harassment are still going on. But individual heads, the regional managers, the editor in charge of the organization, these are the people the ED, the Enforcement Directorate, started proceedings against. How are you receiving certain transfers? Is it part of your salary, or there are some other considerations? So I'm just outlining that there are a lot of these kind of cases going on, which are where it's a real sort of misuse of the legislative system, a misuse of the criminal legal system, where the prosecutors have all the powers, and it's only at a later stage that the court may come down. So finally, the second part is the extrajudicial system, where you actually find, and here I think we should really dedicate the day to those journalists, as many of our friends have pointed out, to those journalists who have lost their lives on the line of duty. In our case, Gauri Lankesh in 2017 was killed by a right-wing group of assassins because she talked of communal harmony. She said this country should not have hate speeches. A journalist, a member of the Mumbai Press Club, J. Day, who was investigating certain rackets of the cricketing betting system, was shot dead by a gangsters mob in 2011. We still remember him, J. Day in 2011. We also remember his name is Jagendra Singh, 2015. And here that's what I say, that all governments, it doesn't mean it's BJP, Congress, Samajwadi Party, when in power, they behave like autocrats. And in this case, Jagendra Singh, during Akhilesh Yadav's Uttar Pradesh regime, was burnt to death by a mob of policemen who were ordered by a minister called Verma, Harish Chandra Verma, because he was exposing a sand mafia operating in the riverbeds in a place called Shahjahanpur in Uttar Pradesh. 2015, a group of policemen come to his house, douse him with petrol, he's burnt to death. So these are the cases that we remember. People on the line of duty for what they're reporting, what they've gone through. In terms of prospects, how do we amplify these cases? That's the measure of discussion. With this short introduction, the judicial way of harassment, the judicial controls, and the extrajudicial killings and harassment that we see all around. If you take that as the background, we can proceed, and let us take it one by one. Could I maybe we start with Sri Lanka? Mr. Lopez, I think we can follow the same pattern. A small introduction of 5 minutes on what the issues are around Sri Lanka, and what do you think is the way forward? How can we overcome that?
Thank you, Mr. Singh. First of all, I'd like to thank UNESCO, the French Consulate, and the Mumbai Press Club for inviting me here and making this happen. It's quite surprising that normally alphabetically I would go last and suddenly turn the other way, so now I'm grappling for points. No, I'm just kidding. So, I mean, as many of you know, I mean, Sri Lanka has gone through some tough times. I mean, consecutively starting from 2019 with the Easter bomb attacks and all the way to the pandemic, and then the last year with the economic crisis. So what this has turned out to be has been making the journalism and media even more challenging, right? One, from the economic front of things. I mean, it's already been reported in the IFJ report as to how it impacts the media and journalism. But as we talk about the good side of, yes, we have had freedom of expression through social media and how it has helped, it has also brought in a different front in Sri Lanka, I guess it's globally as well, where we find sustainability of good journalism, sustainability of newsrooms becoming more challenging, right? Because the Sri Lankan print media especially was not pretty ready for the digital transition, right? We saw a high rate of digital adaptation in regard to people going online, using the mobile phones to consume information and news. But today we find that the digital transition is actually making it very, very difficult for journalists and the newsroom to move on. But what the challenges are is basically like, who is a journalist today? In Sri Lanka, like as Mr. Singh was saying, we do have this issue, like especially the Aragalaya that actually took place, I mean the revolt or the protest that took place. Suddenly you find like, I mean the need for definition of a good journalist or a journalist is cropping up. Because we find like there are influencers, there are social media activists, and there are those who are reporting online. but some of them are trained journalists, some of them are not trained journalists. But then now what happens is we get put in the same segment of journalist and communication, and then we get targeted. We have this issue of aggregators, right? Those who produce information, but then you also have aggregators who are basically just aggregating news, plagiarizing, and then they're basically building their own platforms. Now, people, the consumers, the readers, they do not know some of these differences, which means there's a huge challenge in regard to the media literacy that needs to be done in our area. The same situation that Mr. Singh was referring to, we do have challenges in regard to some of the legislations that have been passed in order to curb the freedom of expression, especially targeting the social media, right? The print, yes. The mainstream media, yes. To a great extent, you can hold them accountable from the ethics point of view in regard to, as we spoke about, how things work. But the social media has actually become a huge challenge for the government. So what they're trying to do now is basically pass on legislations or amend legislations that can actually broaden the umbrella and bring journalists to bring journalism and freedom of expression to a level where it could be censored and they could also have the upper hand. So very recently the government was trying to replace the Prevention of Terrorism Act in Sri Lanka with something called the Anti-Terrorism Act, right? And had that been passed, we would have found ourselves in a situation where journalists would not have even been able to write or do investigative pieces, quote confidential information, because they could have actually been taken in. And that actually takes you to rigorous imprisonment and heavy fines, which could also have a lot of implications on the freedom of expression and for journalism as well. We also had similar acts like the Data Protection Act, which actually got passed, although it says like you can use information and you can publish information that helps public interest, but the terminology public interest and the definition of public interest seems to be very, very vague. So that also creates problems. And we have found in the recent past, like although it has not been an act related to media or an act related to access to information or information, where they introduce clauses in different areas, such as Computer Crimes Act. So you have this clause in the Computer Crimes Act, and they tend to arrest journalists under those clauses and under those acts, so that, I mean, you kind of indirectly communicate the message.
If you can just interrupt, what happened to the Terrorist Act? How was it stopped?
Right. So the activist organization, including the Sri Lanka Press Institute, the Editors Guild, we actually started raising our concerns. So we gave our statements to say that how it actually impedes good journalism and freedom of expression.
So it's put on hold now?
It's put on hold because they were supposed to bill it last Tuesday, but the Justice Minister actually withdrew, saying that they would go in for consultation and then try to bring in a better way of things. So this is another challenge that we have. But besides that, I also see other challenges from another point of view where, like, I don't know how much it's been considered, but it's not a direct threat, but it's definitely an indirect threat to journalism, which is the artificial intelligence. Right? We don't see artificial intelligence as a threat on journalism, but today if you see ChatGPT, Microsoft would roll out their Copilot, right? And then you have Google rolling out. And one of the threats that we have from the commercial point of view, how it's going to impact jobs. But I think what's going to also be challenging is that from where would people consume information and how these AIs would summarize content that is out there online. And then how false information, how it kinds of makes, a way for false information to kind of move in. So that it's also going to have implications, because now you find AI being used in newsrooms, they're testing it, they're piloting it, and how that's going to replace the role and how it's going to impact. So these are some of the challenges that we are going through in Sri Lanka. So with that note,
I'd just like to bring in, since you raised this AI and the the control of electronic media as a specific point, I think it's very interesting, because that's the way the world is moving forward to, from press and broadcasting to the third stage, which is digital media. So the governments are grappling how to control that. And the most recent has been India's Information Technology Rules 2021 has been amended, where the government is now free to appoint a fact-finding unit, a fact-checking unit. So if the government-designated fact-checking unit discovers that something which is it's either misleading or fake. The two terms used are misleading or fake. Once it's designated misleading or fake, it can ask the digital platform to take it down. And if it doesn't take down, then it loses its legal immunity and a safe harbor kind of use for third-party content. So that's pretty serious. And the stand-up comic, it's very interesting. Kunal Kamra has actually taken up the matter. It's before the Mumbai High Court. So I'd just like to bring in Tanmay, since you're really, I think you're working in this area.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important area to really look at, which is how governments, maybe across the board, Indian government, other governments, are trying to control digital media, which is relatively got a freer flow of information purely because it's more difficult to control. So, but how are they bringing these things in?
Yeah, we are working on that. In fact, interestingly, we're on that Kunal Kamra matter. We advised him, had a word with him. We helped draft the petition and file it in the Bombay High Court, and we briefed Mr. Sirvai, who is a constitutional powerhouse, and Mr. Daraiz Khambata, who similarly, to make submissions before the Bombay High Court. I think let's just take a couple of steps back, because one of the advantages that I had of not preparing in advance was that I was sitting in the back of the room and frantically doing some research about mujhe bolna kya hai. And I saw that this morning around 9:30, the press freedom rankings were released by RSF. And just a little bit of context there, India was 142 in 2021, which is not fantastic at all. The year after that, in 2022, India slipped 9 spots to 150, which is a lovely round number. And in this morning, in case anybody hasn't yet seen, does anybody want to take a guess if we improved or went back, or if we've stayed at 150? Does anybody want to guess? Okay, great. Yeah, fantastic. This is a clued in crowd. Good. We are 161, which sounds better than it is, because the rankings only take into account 180 countries. So we are now bottom 20. And bottom 20 is, I assume, not where we want to find ourselves when we're observing a day which is literally titled World Press Freedom Day. But here we are. So I just want to quickly talk about change topics, talk about geology for a bit, because it's interesting there. There are two opposing forces that we learn about in geology. One is gradualism, which describes how the slow and steady march of time and geological processes accumulates over time into visible structures by the Rio Colorado, and is now visible in the state that it is today. This is contrasted by what is called catastrophism, where you have these like large world-changing catastrophic events which shape the geology. For example, the entire set of Hawaiian Islands, which were all individually created by individual supermassive volcanic eruptions. Press freedom in India, I think, sees a bit of a mix of both of these processes. There is the undeniable steady march towards decline, which is the gradualism phase, which you've spoken about, Gurbeer, much better than I'm going to be able to, so I'm just not going to do that. I will talk about the catastrophism part, which is also sharply visible, and I think a lot more fun to talk about, in as much fun as this conversation can be. So what happened in the last year? What happened in these 12 months that have made us lose 11 ranking points, go down to the bottom 20? And I should say that everybody who's on stage here represents countries that are all above India, by the way. So congratulations, you guys. One of the things that happened, and without getting into the good or the bad of it, was, I guess, Adani's takeover of NDTV may have played a factor. I don't know. Another thing that happened that Gurbeer's already talked about is India banned the BBC documentary, and it rewarded BBC with a raid in its office premises, and it even seized the mobile phones and laptops of journalists who were working there at the office at the time. 3, the Pegasus thing had happened a couple of years ago, It went to the Supreme Court. Several journalists and other people who had allegedly who had Pegasus on their phones, they approached the Supreme Court seeking some form of justice. I don't know what justice you will receive in a matter as dangerous as Pegasus, particularly for something that has now happened. The Supreme Court ordered an investigation into this. It appointed a committee. That committee went back and it investigated. But interestingly, it only investigated the people who said they have Pegasus. It did not or could not perhaps investigate the role of the government at all. This is noted in the Supreme Court's order that the central government just absolutely refused to cooperate before the Supreme Court and also before this investigation committee. So the investigation committee comes back, it says, here you go, we've done the investigation, this is the report, please enjoy yourself, it's kind of long. The conclusion is we haven't actually found any Pegasus. And then when we were in court, we were representing a few petitioners there and we said, okay, that's great, fantastic, thanks for doing the investigation. Can we have a quick look at the report? And they said no. And the Supreme Court also said, no need for that. We'll put it in a sealed cover and we'll store it very, very safely in the Supreme Court registry where it stays today. So what happened with the investigation? Nobody knows. Is this a factor in the press freedom rankings? Possibly. Fourth, and I'll talk a lot about this because this is really important. This is the Digital India part, which is that India proposed and then issued a rule which as an amendment to the IT rules 2021, basically establishing a fact check unit which has the powers of declaring any information on the internet as fake or false or misleading. If the information is about the central government. So what we essentially have is a rule that is on the books. They proposed it and they passed it. It's there. This is a law now. And this is a law that we may very well have to live with, is that the central government now has the power to determine by itself what the truth is, and it can take that down from the internet forever. And we just have to abide by that. Because the consequence of not doing that is that any intermediary who refuses to abide by this order loses their intermediary protection, and intermediary protections are absolutely crucial to survive on the internet. Otherwise what happens is you become directly responsible or liable for what anybody says on your platform. Now imagine Twitter. Twitter currently is protected by this intermediary liability protection from any lawsuits that emerge from speech that is on Twitter. There are approximately 34 million Indians who use Twitter. Can Twitter possibly operate in a jurisdiction where if X person says something to Y person that is defamatory in nature, Twitter can be hauled up to court? That's a logistical and a practical nightmare, which is why we have these things to foster innovation. That will go. And it will, just in case somebody thinks that it won't, it will. Twitter in July of 2021 came very close to that, when in the first version of these IT rules, which required them to appoint officers and station them in India, have them be resident, wasn't able to do that, and the government said, okay, you will lose your intermediary protections, and then 2 weeks later they had these officers. Anyway, we'll come back to that. Fifth, for what feels like the 100th time in a row, India is #1 in internet shutdowns worldwide. That hasn't stopped. In 2021, there was a study that was conducted which found that India lost $2.8 billion as a result of direct economic losses that we have faced as a result of internet shutdowns. It was reported that the indirect losses could be about half as much more. So do we really have $4 billion to lose on internet shutdowns every time there's a protest in Jharkhand or on the borders of Delhi? I'm not so sure. And sixth, this is something Gurbir has already hinted towards, so I won't go too much into it. But this is something that a lot of people would have missed. In 2011, in the Anup Bhuya judgment, the Supreme Court had given some protections against the UAPA provisions, particularly related to bail. They were not great, but they were there. This year, that's been rolled back as well by a subsequent judgment of the Supreme Court. So now we don't even have whatever little we had against the UAPA. So that's where we are. I promise you, the second I get the mic back, I will be way more optimistic This was the bad news. I promise you there is some good news, but I'll pause here and we'll get back to me.
Yeah, so we'll hold that for the end, the good news. Thanks very much, Tanmay. I think he's really given us a good window and a good kind of glimpse of what digital media today is grappling with, not only in India but elsewhere too. So we'll go elsewhere. Maybe could we have Tasmina Hussain online? Do we have her online somewhere? Or yeah, welcome Tasmina. I must tell you that we also hosted about 2 years ago Shahidul Alam, a prominent photojournalist from Bangladesh, and I think he was incarcerated, thrown in jail, spent several months in jail because he was a voice of protest in Bangladesh, and finally he was released, and I think he's still fighting his cases. So I think many of the things we are grappling with in India, you are grappling with in Bangladesh. So do tell us about it, Tasmina. Tell us what the issues are, what the prospects for freedom of the press in Bangladesh are.
Well, to cut short, because I see many people are waiting to speak. So we had a discussion in Mumbai Press Freedom Day yesterday, that was the second. The journalists, the editors council has arranged it, and where we have asked our president, who is Mr. Makuzalon, editor of Daily Star, saying that government must either repeat, we are fighting of the Digital Security Act 2080. So that's what is the most concern. And I just would like to add few words about, few sentences about the newspaper I represent, the newspaper, which is one of the oldest, which started in 1951 as a weekly and then daily from 53. And it was started by my father-in-law. And we fought that time all that law, like 1958 martial law. And 64, he was arrested in 64, in 62, 66, and 68, and the paper was shut. And I see
are facing some harassment under this law. You're saying that?
under this law.
Either they've been arrested or harassed or cases filed against them. Is that right?
Yes.
That's a very large number, 27% of journalists.
That's what the leading newspaper, Prothamalo, has published. And so the situation, I don't see any better in the subcontinent or the countries where we are representing from South Asia. So that's all I can say. We are asking for the repeal of the creation of the Digital Security Act in a certain manner that it must focus only on the clearly defined cybercrime and does not in any way hamper the operation of free media and freedom of expression. So this is one of our demands.
So should we go to the other countries? Maybe we come back to you. Could we have, say, Ms. Pushpa Chetri from Bhutan, maybe introduce something on this?
No, here.
Well, it's going to be a slightly different take for me, coming from the training background rather than being a journalist myself. I would like to share my observations and my experience running this training institute for the past 13 years and having worked with Quinsel, the first national newspaper before that, for 15 years. And recently, what we have been seeing being expressed by the media is that what is really, who is the press freedom for? Is it for the journalists? If it's for the people, and if the media is just a medium to express and to really give a platform for people to voice, then should it really be the journalists who should be bearing the brunt of the attacks that we are seeing on journalists for voicing out freedom of press? So actually, in Bhutan, it's a slightly different situation as compared to the rest, because when we talk about safety of journalists, we are not talking really about life-threatening issues. We are really dealing with basics. We are dealing with basics of, do we have safety gears being worn by the journalists going to a disaster site? Do we have equipped, do we have, like as frontliners, like the rest of the people who go to a disaster site or to any other, sites which requires the safety gears, we do not have. Like, for example, the COVID times. So we are dealing with safety in that sense. We are talking about psychological safety. So with the help of UNESCO, we have been trying to see where we can come in as both the Media and Communications Institute, where can we come in to assist in providing the right skills to the journalists in order to enable them to do their duties well. And even basic skills are not available on a regular basis. We are talking about, financial safety, where we do not have the resources to even provide the basic trainings for journalists who join. So we do not have mentoring on a regular basis. It's all donor-driven. When we have resources, it's provided. When there are no resources, not provided. We have young, energetic journalists who like to work hard, but they have to be given the right platform. We have to give them empower them with the right skills. So there are those who are really doing well and who are, who have had the right training and experience, but we have mostly very young journalists who require that kind of professional development. So both the Media and Communications has been providing trainings from 2012. So when we talk about the safety in psychological well-being, we are trying to see, who are these journalists? They are humans after all. They require the support system. They require proper work environment, the working hours, the salary, the overall conducive environment for their growth, and the access to information. So the biggest challenge for Bhutan, I feel, is really getting access to information. This has been quoted over and over and over by the media houses, that they've had problems. although our constitution also provides the freedom of expression, you know, it's enshrined in the constitution, freedom of expression, freedom of press, but our Bhutan civil service regulations, BCSR, that prohibits the civil servants from criticizing their own organizations. But this has been largely misread as they cannot criticize at all, or they cannot speak at all, rather. They cannot speak to the media. And media literacy being very low in the country, we do not have trained media officers to actually, you know, have a strong interface for the media to get information. So we are seeing a situation where we should have a very conducive ecosystem for the journalists to operate. They cannot just, you know, operate in isolation. We need these ecosystems like the capacity building, the resources that are required for them, good salary. You know, our media houses are challenged by very poor readership and the reach. And then now with proliferation of social media, they come into, you know, direct conflict with social media, netizens. And so over there, again, the digital skills are coming very important to have digital skills and multimedia skills, rather, in order to, you know, cope up with the upcoming challenges. So we have been providing multimedia skills training, again, depending on how much funds are available and whether the projects allow that. So that's
Pushpa,
the situation,
I'll just butt
yes.
in. You know, you flagged a very important point that the you know, that the growth of the media is in a nascent stage where the basics are being grappled with, training, the resources, etc. But what is the legal environment? Can people freely report? Are there challenges on that front?
Again, on that front, I would say that legal, you know, the media reporters themselves have very little skills on reporting legal issues.
No, I don't mean legal. What I meant was,
yes.
I mean, Bhutan being a kingdom, what are the judicial principles or the rules and the you know, the technology rules, etc., which can reporters, news organizations work freely, or are they various forms of censorship? What are the kind of issues that you're, I mean, from the legislative and, you know, from a control point of view?
Okay.
Is media controlled, or is it relatively free, to put it in a word?
It's relatively free, I would say, but there is a small society syndrome that kind of challenges the journalists, and self-censorship has been the most important, you know, the biggest challenge for themselves. Yes.
To move on, could I have Durga Bhandari Paudel give a little bit of idea on what is happening in Nepal? I think Nepal's had a very vibrant democracy. Governments change very often, and I think media plays a big role in Nepal to either pull down governments, prop up governments, and to reach information to the various corners of the country. So if you can give us a little bit of glimpse about what's happening.
I have prepared some points about current situation of media freedom in Nepal. First of all, I would like to thanks for program and chairman of this program, highly respected responsibilities, representing different countries and organizations. On behalf of Press Council Nepal, I would like to express my gratitude to the program of organizer for giving me this opportunity to participate in the event. Today we also celebrate World Press Freedom Day. On this occasion, I would like to express my best wishes to all journalists around the world. I also wish that all can fully enjoy the freedom. I have highlighted some points. In Nepal, the situation of press freedom. Press freedom is a major issue in Nepal. The government often tries to control and regulate the media in past. Journalists were threatened, harassed, and imprisoned or reporting on sensitive issue, including on sensitive and human rights violation. Lack of resources. Most Nepali media outlets are small and poorly funded, which limits their ability to gather and report on news. This can also lead to lack of diversity in media coverage, with many stories going unreported. Political instability, main problem. Nepal has history of political instability, which can affect the media environment. Changes in government or political leadership can lead to change in media politics, and journalists may face pressure to align themselves with a particular political action. Censorship and self-censorship. Due to the challenging media environment, Nepali journalists may face censorship or choose to self-censor in order to avoid controversy or relation. Safety concern. Journalists in Nepal may face safety concern, particularly if they report on sensitive issues or investigate corruption and or criminal activities, threats, harassment, and physical attack. Not uncommon, and journalists may have difficulty accessing protective measures or legal resources. Print media facing the problem. For small investing medias, there is no proper resources due to new digital medias. There is crisis for print newspaper. Print media in crisis. Now the trend of reading newspaper is decreasing. Customers and advertising markets are sinking. The advertising markets are small. False and inaccurate news, as well as situation and based solicitation and based news threats press freedom. Now, in implementation of Working Journalist Act, non-implementation of Working Journalist Act, it has been 30 years since this law was made, but the government authorities are not interested to implementing it. These are the point of my.
So, thank you very much, Ms. Durga Paudel. We come to the last leg, which is, you see, basically how Tanmay put it, we are now 161, did you say? So I was on the last figure, which was 150, which was last year, but now the latest shows that India's declined to 161. See, part of the debate is, what are the prospects? How can we reverse this? Now, just as an example, this was much before some of us were even born. In 1982-83, somewhere, there was a Bihar press bill. This was the largest mobilization of journalists I've ever seen. I've just entered journalism that time. And Bihar, under a Congress government, the chief minister was Jagannath, promulgated a law that if the government wants and if notice is given, the editor and the journalist has to reveal his sources, how he got the information. This is something which is absolutely, it's the core of journalism, that you protect your sources. Without protecting your sources, you'll never be able to get information. And this law came in that time. That time, even the Times of India editor, in his ivory tower, sitting in the old lady of Bori Bandar, and in Delhi, all the big time journalists and the big time editors all came to the streets. About 200 journalists were arrested from this Azad Maidan, which is next door, and there is an Azad Maidan police station across the road from where we are, and they were all incarcerated there for about 2 days. So that's the kind of mobilization. I'm just not telling you about Mumbai, but it was all over the country, and the central government had to step in, and finally the Bihar government had to withdraw this bill. So that's the kind of amplification we're talking about. So in prospects, can we amplify, can we underline, and can we become a voice which can roll back some of these authoritarian measures? Maybe we can start with Lopez. I mean, what do you think? You just spoke about how the Terrorism Act as applied to the news media was rolled back. So, maybe you could have some suggestions on that.
I think yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a constant struggle, and then the fact that we have social media, sometimes it's perceived as, how do you say, it can be a threat to this itself because of the amount of false information, the propaganda and organized propaganda that could take place through social media. But what we have also found in the recent experience, or in the experience before as well, you can actually work in a very nice coalition where the strong activists on social media, the mainstream media, being a good partner with the coalitions, and it can actually work in tandem, so that as a stronger group, we can actually raise our voice against it. And it has worked. And even the ATA, the Anti-Terrorism Act, is a classic example of that. The media organizations, the newsrooms, the Editors Guild, right, they all came on board basically to say, come in, look, we have to say no to it. The fact that today we have Sri Lanka Press Institute in Sri Lanka is for a similar example as we just quoted in '82.
That's your Bihar Press Bill in that sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. So great. So that's a very important suggestion that we amplify. If Tasmima is still with us? Tasmima?
I am.
Yeah. So, yeah, Tasmima, would you have any suggestions on how do we expand media freedoms? Maybe Bangladesh and the rest of the world?
Well, like you said, when the government is in opposition, they are our friends. And when they are in position, we lose our position. So everywhere in the world today, it's a free press, if you call the digital platform, is doing excellent, but whoever the ruling group is, they will always try to use the gag rope, I say that. And we have to protest, keep on protesting, because free information they don't get, they will be misled. So that's what's happening. And like Saruna said, the government or the member of parliament today is no more the kind of government we used to see. So citizen ends up at the mercy of the government. That's what is happening. So we said we will keep on protesting. We will keep on struggling. We have to keep on protesting and justify. And we have to have the court to support us. Supreme Court. India, we always give example of India. It's the biggest country next to us, the biggest neighbor, and it's supporting Bangladesh. So we are also disheartened to see what's happening. And I have seen our newspaper has suffered from all over from 54, 58, when we were in Pakistan, still now. So the attitude doesn't change. The moment government always thinks free press is a threat, but it is not. They have to understand that. They have to understand that. That's all I can say. And the fight will go on. Thank you.
So thank you. I think the takeaway is the fight has to go on, and I think that's an important statement Tasmima is making. Pushpaji, you already actually made a lot of suggestions on how to expand the news communication system in Bhutan, all the basics that are required. But would you like to comment as a last point to be made?
Yes, thank you. I think events like this, when people, like-minded people get together, like-minded organizations get together to come up with solutions. We need more of these, more of networking, I believe, more concerted effort to come up with solutions which is viable for everyone. And when we work in isolation, that's where we go amiss, I think. So I would like to take this opportunity to actually thank Mumbai Press Club, UNESCO, and Consulate France here for organizing this and giving us a platform to participate. I'm not here really because I wanted to share anything momentous, but it was very heartening to see that when organizations like this do not miss out on smaller organizations who are tucked away somewhere in the Himalayas and still, give a platform to voice and see and learn from networking. So I believe events like this would really help. Thank you.
Durga Paudel, ma'am, would you also, you've already given some suggestions, but anything specific would you like to comment on?
Thank you. The protection of media freedom is essential. The promotion of healthy democracy and human rights, as it follows the free flow of information, ideas, and opinion. Law should be strengthened to protect journalists from harassment, intimidation, and physical attack. Government should also ensure that defamation laws are not used to silence critical reporting. The governments should guarantee the physical and social security of journalists. For that, the government should show interest in the implementation of Working Journalist Act in Nepal situation.
So, very interesting. Maharashtra, I think, probably is the only state in India, after about 5 years of agitation by journalists, has promulgated a sort of Prevention of Attacks on Journalists Act, by which any attack on a journalist will be treated separately as a cognizable offense and an immediate FIR registered. And for destruction of equipment like photography, cameras and things like that, there should be compensation. I don't know how much it has been implemented, but at least the act was passed. And maybe many of our journalist students who are here should actually investigate whether any cases have been registered under this act or not. But, from Nepal's point of view, this is one of the acts. A special act has been passed, only in Maharashtra, not for the rest of the country. So just as a flagging point, now we are almost at the end of our session, and I'd appeal to Tanmay also to give his very well-researched views on what he thinks could be points which we should flag and how we could probably take the fight for freedom of expression and a free press ahead. Short points, because we have to end.
Yes, I know that we have to end soon, and I know that we've taken a lot of time. But I actually really think, Gurbir, that this is the most important part of the discussion. So with your permission and with the other co-panelists and UNESCO, and in fact, everybody who's here, with your permission, I may take 3 to 5 minutes on this, because this is the part that I actually really sat and thought about, because I think that, it's a weekday. If you are here at 12:46 p.m. on a weekday, from your taking a break from your life or your classes or your job or whatever, at some point you are already aware that things are bad. You don't need me to like list out 6 points ki oh ho, UAPA has gone, oh ho, nothing happened with Pegasus. Like, at some level, everybody here is already aware that it's not great. What is actually really important to talk about is, okay, great, fine, this has happened, that's cool. What do we do from this point on? And is there any good news at all? There is. There has been some positive clawback. For example, the fact-check unit rules that Gurbir and I have both spoken about a lot. The Bombay High Court is hearing that matter. It was filed by Kunal Kamra. We have helped him out on that. The Indian government has had to give an undertaking to the court that they will not implement these rules. They will not appoint a fact-check unit until July, which will give the court some time to hear it and decide on the matter. This was last Thursday. So, you know, these good things can happen. I think that the biggest problem is that all of the catastrophic events that I was talking about, taken together cumulatively, they form what is called a chilling effect. And if you're already familiar with chilling effect, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, what the chilling effect is, that nobody comes to you and says, hey, don't say that. Nobody will come to you and say, stop writing that. It is when you write something out and then in your mind there's a voice that says, maybe I should not say this. And then you delete it and that's it. In that one moment, your free speech, your free expression, it's gone. And that is a very dangerous thing. It has been recognized as a real thing by the Supreme Court, and it is a violation of your Article 19 rights under the Constitution of India. The good news is that while the chilling effect absolutely is real, it's not here in this room. We are all able to come together, get on stage, have a chat, talk about it fairly candidly about it. And I think that's really valuable. But it is just step one. Like, it doesn't stop there. You have to, I think, take recourse to your constitutional remedies, which have been provided to you by the Constitution of India under Articles 226 and 32 of the Constitution. I'll give you a quick example of Sabina, who's here. We at the Internet Freedom Foundation, I'm a lawyer. I work with the Internet Freedom Foundation. We do digital rights. We work a lot on privacy and censorship and things like that. We had a case a few years ago where a young lady, an artist, was a victim of sexual harassment by a very prominent artist. And she'd written about it. And what she got in return was a defamation suit. And what the gentleman had also asked in the defamation suit was complete censorship of these articles. So Sabina and IFF had a conversation, and Sabina basically said, no, this is not right. We should intervene in these. So she was with a journalist organization at the time, and IFF had provided legal support in intervening in that case, and ultimately no censorship happened. Similarly, last year, when we were thinking that it is finally time to have a conversation in the Supreme Court about the validity of the sedition law, which the British had left behind for us, along with the beautiful buildings in Fort. Sabina and I had a conversation, and by the end of the week, a journalist union, a representative of a journalist union had called me and said, you know, we should take this to court, we should challenge this. So we filed a petition on their behalf. We represented them in court, and currently today, the operation of the provision of sedition is stayed in India. Practically speaking, we don't have a sedition law, even though it exists on the books, and I'll be fair, may well come back if the proceedings proceed. What does that mean? If you are a part of a journalist organization or a media association or a press club, ask yourself if there is space in your organization to have these conversations about the constitutional remedies that are available to your organization. Just the fact that there is an association, just the fact that there is a press club, there is a way for voices to come together, gives you a lot more force behind it than individual voices, and that is absolutely valuable. See if you can go beyond that, whether you can consider exercising your constitutional remedies under Article 226 or 32. If you can't, that's still fine. For example, the fact-check amendment, it was issued on April 6, but it was released as a proposed amendment on January 20 for public comments. Think about whether you or your press organization had submitted comments. If not, think about whether you or your press organization would consider doing that the next time. This is not a fruitless exercise, by the way, because the first draft of these fact check amendments rested that power with the PIB. I don't think I need to explain to anybody in this room how terrible of an idea that is. That was clawed back. Now it's an independent organization committee which will be set up by the central government, which I know is not the best outcome, but it's better than where we were. Okay, that's some of the things, Gurbir, that I had thought. And in case you're thinking, well, we don't know any lawyers who can help out, boss, I'm sitting here as solid proof that you do. Okay.
We're pretty much invited, and I don't know.
Just to answer your question, we have a UNESCO office in Pakistan, and they organize their own event for the World Press Freedom Day, and in Kathmandu also, and in Bangladesh also. So this is the reason why we could not invite a representative from Pakistan. Thank you.
Maybe you should also ask about China, why they're not. Anyway, please. Just one sec, there's somebody here. Next.
So, hi everyone. So I have a question for, especially for the Indian panelists. So I have written here that does the acquisition of media firms from the conglomerates will make media personality courageous enough to choose the path of free press?
Sorry, come again?
So I have a question that the acquisition of media firms from the conglomerates, just like Adani of NDTV and other firms, will that make the media personalities as well as firm courageous to choose the path of free press? Because just I have seen the panelists speaking about governments and all the personalities, but in India today we are facing the issue that even the media personalities are not courageous enough to choose the path of free press. So
I think it's a very good question. It's just that.
The problem is actually where is the journalist in the present situation when the owners are being muzzled. Actually there is no media muzzle bolo to actually it is muzzling the owners. It's not necessary that the journalist has to be muzzled anymore.
A little bit of history on this. As students or as journalists, we should go into it also. During the Nehru period of India, which is soon after independence, there were various press commissions. And a common line running through these press commission reports was basically saying that corporate groups which have got other interests in business or other things should not enter the area of the fourth estate. If the fourth estate has to be independent, it should be run through trusts or those businesses which are only involved in the business of a newspaper, because there was no broadcasting at that time. This was largely recommendatory, and I think the Nehru government never got around to actually legislating on that or any such thing. And slowly, at the first stage was big business groups which were into printing and into newspaper industry, but then slowly others also came in. And yes, I think once there are other interests which take over the question of running newspapers, broadcasting house, digital media, then definitely there is very often a conflict of interest. You're very much right in that. But to be clear on that, there's no law which prevents it. There are laws which sort of define monopoly, and if there's a monopolistic situation, yes, there are certain laws which prevent that. But the fact of ownership by a conglomerate, as you put it, of newspaper industry or the news media, there's nothing which is stopping that. And yes, there is a conflict of interest. Whether, as Mr. Reddy put it, journalists are are it's very difficult for journalists to reverse that, because we are victims of that. Because very often in these takeovers, people are thrown out of jobs, people come under different sort of pressures on how to report, what to report, and all that. So those factors are there. Maybe that's the thing that you're pointing to, that we should maybe demand legislation which prevents this kind of concentration of economic power in the hands of a few. But that's for the future. I don't think right now there's anything preventing that. Would you like to say something?
My answer also the same.
Yeah.
It's a very valid point I did say about vilification of media. I did talk about it. Gurbir has made one point, but the other point I think, Gurbir, which has really impacted the media and the trade unions, are 2 points. One is the labor codes. When the press commission sat, it was very clear, if you want an independent media, you need a media journalists who work without fear or favor. So there was a Working Journalists Act. And because we had an act and there was a wage board, we journalists, I think we senior journalists by now, हम लोग काम कर सकते थे. We could work freely because my job, I had a sense of security of job. My employer could not remove me. He had to find ways, different ways. However, the system of employment has changed. The Working Journalists Act has been thrown away. Labor code has come in. Hire and fire policy has come in. So it impacts the journalists because, rightly so, we got to earn our bread as well. So we can't fight the system, and the contractual system where we also failed was that trade unions did not understand the implication of the change of system in employment. Contractual meant you issue a pink slip. So this too is an issue which we are facing.
So there's one last question maybe we can take and then wind up. Is there anything else? Otherwise we'll close. Ashita, I think we are more or less done. Would you like to take over and end the session?
We thank Mr. Gurbir Singh for moderating this wonderful, informative panel discussion, highlighting the media challenges in not only in India but also South Asia. And we duly thank our panelists from Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal and Sri Lanka for sharing their country perspectives with regards to media rights and highlighting the challenges. Mr. Singh, would you like to conclude the panel discussion? Okay, all right. Thank you very much, and I invite Ashita for a vote of thanks.
Well, thank you all for joining us for the celebration of World Press Freedom Day. A special thanks to the Consulate General of France in Mumbai and to the Mumbai Press Club for collaborating with the UNESCO New Delhi office for this observance of 30th anniversary of the World Press Freedom Day. I would also personally thank Snehal from the Consulate's office, Mr. Rajesh, Mr. David, Mr. Gurbir Singh, Mr. Ayaz for their continued support for the smooth, flawless event held here at the Mumbai Press Club, and my colleagues back at the UNESCO New Delhi office who are there providing the technical support and all the support for today's event. We now invite you for lunch, which is being served at the cafeteria. Thank you all for joining.